The chapel was silent, except for the faint drip of wax falling from a single candle. Sister Elena clutched the priest's trembling hand, unaware that his final words would shatter everything she thought she knew about him and about herself.
Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful stories like this. And if this moment touched your heart, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs hope today.
Father Gabriel had been the guiding light of St. Augustine's parish for nearly 3 decades. To the townspeople, he was more than just a priest. He was a healer, a protector, a man who seemed untouchable by the world's cruelty. But on this storm-lashed night, as thunder rolled beyond the stained-glass windows, he was nothing more than a fragile body battling its final moments. Elena had not always imagined herself as a nun. Years earlier, she had been a lost soul wandering through the ashes of her own mistakes. The convent became her refuge, a place to silence the noise of regret and rebuild her faith. Father Gabriel had been the one to take her in, to look past her scars and give her a chance at redemption. That bond made his decline feel unbearable. He whispered her name with effort. "Elena, promise me you'll do one last thing for me." Her heart raced. Nuns were used to vows of obedience, but this felt different. His eyes were pleading, not commanding. She leaned closer, her hand trembling against his. "What is it, Father?" For a moment, silence filled the air, punctuated only by the rain striking the roof like a drumbeat. Then came his request, one that would not only challenge her devotion, but also draw her into a storm far greater than the one outside the chapel walls. But before she could answer, a nurse stepped in, adjusting the priest's pillow and breaking the intensity of the moment. Elena held the secret in her chest, her mind already spiraling with questions. Later, as the parishioners gathered in hushed groups, they whispered of his weakening health, of what the church would do without him. Elena remained apart, her gaze fixed on the closed door behind which he rested. She carried the weight of words she could not share. Not yet. That night, when Father Gabriel passed, the church bells tolled 12 times, echoing across the village. People wept, candles were lit, and prayers filled the sanctuary. Yet, Elena's grief was laced with something heavier, a burden. Because what Father Gabriel had asked of her wasn't just a dying wish. It was a mission that would place her faith, loyalty, and very identity in jeopardy. She knelt before the altar, clutching her rosary so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She whispered, "Give me strength," knowing the road ahead would test her more than any vow she had ever taken. What she didn't realize was that the priest's final request would unravel secrets buried deep within the church itself and place her directly against powers that had long ruled in silence.
The morning after Father Gabriel's passing, the town gathered in sorrow. Black veils, bowed heads, and the heavy scent of incense filled the sanctuary. But beneath the grief, Elena felt the pulsing weight of his last words, words she still dared not share. During the funeral mass, the bishop from the diocese, Bishop Calder, delivered a eulogy that sounded polished but hollow, as if he were reading lines written long before the man had died. Elena clenched her hands in her lap. The bishop had always carried himself like a ruler, not a shepherd. Even Father Gabriel had confided that Calder cared more about influence than souls. After the service, as mourners left with tear-stained faces, Calder's sharp eyes found Elena. His lips curved into the faintest of smirks, a gesture that unsettled her. "Your mentor lived a long life," he said, his tone slick with formality. "Now it is time for the parish to move forward under proper guidance." The words struck her like cold iron. He didn't mean guidance, he meant control. Elena bowed her head respectfully, but inside she recoiled. She knew Father Gabriel's wish, though still half-veiled in mystery, would not align with the bishop's hunger for authority. That night, while the convent was cloaked in silence, Elena returned to Father Gabriel's quarters. His belongings were few: a worn Bible, a rosary missing 2 beads, and a small wooden chest that looked far too heavy for its size. She hesitated, then knelt and opened it. Inside lay a stack of letters, all bound by a single faded ribbon. At the very top was one envelope marked with her name. Her breath caught. She opened it carefully, her hands trembling. His handwriting stretched across the page with deliberate strokes. "Elena, my daughter in faith, if you are reading this, I am gone. What I ask of you is not simple. There is truth hidden within these letters, truth the Church has buried for decades. Promise me you will not let them silence it." Her pulse quickened. She rifled through the stack, glimpsing fragments, receipts, confessions, and testimonies signed by parishioners who had long since vanished. Some were dated over 30 years ago. And then, one letter bore a seal she recognized instantly: the diocese crest. Elena's blood ran cold. Why would Father Gabriel hide documents from the very authority he had served? Before she could read further, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway. She quickly shut the chest, tucking it beneath the bed. The door creaked open, and Sister Agnes, the convent's eldest nun, entered with a lantern. "Elena," she whispered, "the bishop has asked to see you tomorrow morning. Be careful." Agnes's eyes held something more than concern: fear. Elena lay awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling beams, the priest's words ringing in her ears. "Promise me, you will not let them silence it." What had Father Gabriel uncovered? And why had he trusted her, of all people, with this burden? She didn't know yet, but she sensed the storm was only beginning.
Morning sunlight pierced through the stained glass windows, scattering crimson and gold across the chapel floor. To the townspeople, it was a new day of prayer. To Sister Elena, it was the first day she would face Bishop Calder, carrying Father Gabriel's hidden truth in her heart. The bishop received her in the rectory, seated at Father Gabriel's old desk, as though it were already his throne. Papers were neatly stacked before him, but Elena noticed the way he kept one hand on the drawer, as if guarding something unseen. His smile was thin, his eyes calculating. "Sister Elena," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "Father Gabriel spoke highly of you. Loyal, obedient. I trust you will continue serving the Church with the same discretion." The way he lingered on that last word made her skin prickle. She folded her hands tightly to hide their trembling. "Yes, Bishop, I serve the Church with all my heart." He leaned forward, his voice soft but sharp. "The priest kept documents, old, irrelevant things. If you should happen upon them, it is your duty to bring them directly to me. Do you understand?" Her breath caught. He already knew, or at least suspected. She nodded faintly, but inside, her pulse thundered. As she walked back through the courtyard, the other sisters passed her with kind smiles, but Elena felt the bishop's shadow trailing her every step. She could not tell them, not yet. The weight of secrecy pressed so heavily on her chest that she felt she might collapse beneath it. Later that afternoon, while helping to distribute bread to the poor, Elena overheard murmurs among the villagers. "They say Father Gabriel was troubled at the end." "Troubled by what?" "No one knows, but the bishop will see to it that the past stays buried." The words were daggers. Even outside the convent walls, whispers confirmed what Elena feared. Something dark was being hidden, and Calder was determined to erase it. That evening, Elena returned to the wooden chest, her hands shaking as she sifted through the letters once more. A pattern began to form. Testimonies from parishioners describing abuses of power, misused funds, even confessions of crimes shielded by the church's influence. Each page was a brick in a wall of silence, and at the heart of it, one name appeared again and again: Calder. Elena dropped the letter, her stomach twisting. The very man now sitting in Father Gabriel's chair had orchestrated this network of secrecy, and Father Gabriel, in his final days, had entrusted her with exposing it. Suddenly, a knock rattled her door. She scrambled to hide the papers beneath her mattress just as Sister Agnes entered with her lantern once more. "Elena," Agnes whispered, her face pale. "You must be careful. The bishop has spies, even here." Elena's throat tightened. "Why didn't you warn me sooner?" Agnes's eyes glistened. "Because once you carry the truth, child, there is no going back." For the first time, Elena understood. This wasn't just a dying priest's last wish. It was a battle, and she was already in the crosshairs.
The convent bells rang at dawn, their solemn chimes echoing through the village. To outsiders, life at St. Augustine seemed unchanged. Hymns sung, candles lit, prayers whispered. But for Sister Elena, every sound carried a new weight. Each footstep in the corridor, each glance from a fellow nun felt like a test of loyalty. At breakfast, she noticed the subtle shift. Two younger sisters whispered when she entered, their eyes darting toward her before lowering again. Were they simply mourning Father Gabriel? Or had Calder already planted suspicion among them? Her answer came sooner than she wished. Later that morning, the bishop summoned the entire convent to the chapel. Standing tall before the altar, he spoke with the tone of a commander rather than a shepherd. "Father Gabriel served faithfully," Calder began, his voice rolling through the hall. "But we must not dwell on the past. The church must look forward. Loyalty and obedience are paramount in these times. Anyone found disrupting that unity—" His pause was deliberate, his gaze sweeping across the sisters until it lingered on Elena. "Will answer not only to me, but to God Himself." The words were cloaked in holiness, but the threat was sharp. Elena felt her stomach twist. He knew she was hiding something, and this was his warning shot. That night, she returned to her cell, bolting the wooden door behind her. With trembling hands, she pulled the hidden letters from beneath her mattress and laid them out in a circle on the floor. One after another, the testimonies painted the same picture, a trail of silence, fear, and broken lives, all tied back to Calder. Her chest tightened as she read a statement from a parishioner she remembered from childhood, a widow named Clara, who had mysteriously vanished years ago. The letter claimed Calder had pressured her to surrender land deeds to the diocese. Shortly after, she disappeared. The paper was signed in Clara's neat script, but it was stamped with a chilling addendum: "For safekeeping, in case anything should happen to me." Elena covered her mouth with her hand. This wasn't just about misused funds. People had suffered. Some may have even died. A sudden knock startled her. She shoved the letters beneath her robes just as the door creaked open. A man stood there, not a nun, but one of the bishop's aides. His expression was smooth, unreadable. "The bishop requests your presence," he said. Her pulse raced. At this hour? She hesitated, then followed. The corridors seemed endless, lit only by flickering torches. When they entered Calder's study, he was waiting in the shadows, a decanter of wine in his hand. "Elena," he said softly, almost kindly, "you remind me of Gabriel,
so earnest, so naive. He trusted too much. Tell me, did he leave you anything before he passed? The question was a blade hidden in velvet. She lowered her eyes, forcing her voice steady. Only his blessing. Calder smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good, then keep it that way. Her knees threatened to buckle as she left the room. She clutched the hidden papers against her chest beneath her robes, her heart pounding. Father Gabriel's final wish was pulling her deeper into danger, and the walls around her were closing fast.
Sleep became a stranger to Sister Elena. Each night she lay awake, listening to the creaks of the convent walls, the shuffle of footsteps beyond her door, the weight of secrets pressing on her chest. Father Gabriel's letters were not only dangerous, they were alive, whispering to her every time she touched them, "Do not let them silence it." The next day, Calder tightened his grip on the parish. Notices were posted on the bulletin board declaring new directives. All letters, records, and documents from Father Gabriel's era were to be surrendered to the bishop's office. Failure to comply, the notice warned, would be considered defiance of holy authority. Elena read the words with a shiver. It was not just an order, it was a net cast wide enough to trap her if she slipped even once. While others busied themselves with chores, she slipped into the village market under the guise of purchasing candles. There, away from the stone walls of the convent, she searched for answers. She asked discreetly about Clara, the widow from the letter. Most shrugged, but one old shopkeeper's face darkened at the name. "Clara?" he whispered. "She was devout, generous. Then one day she was gone. They said she moved, but no one ever saw her again. Her cottage was taken by the diocese." Elena's chest ached. Father Gabriel had been right. Something terrible lay hidden beneath the church's polished veneer. But the more she uncovered, the greater the danger grew. That evening, Sister Agnes caught her alone in the cloister. The elder nun's eyes darted around before she pressed a folded scrap of parchment into Elena's palm. "I found this among Father Gabriel's things before they cleared his room," Agnes whispered. "I think it's meant for you." Elena unfolded the parchment. It was not a letter, but a map. Roughly drawn, it showed the parish grounds with one place circled in ink, the crypt beneath the chapel. Scrawled in Gabriel's handwriting were 4 words that made her heart pound. "The truth lies here." Her hands shook as she tucked the map into her sleeve. Could this be the key to everything? But before she could slip away, a shadow fell across the courtyard. Calder's aide stood there again, watching her with eyes too sharp, too knowing. "The bishop grows concerned," he said smoothly. "You seem restless, sister. Be mindful." Restlessness can be misunderstood as rebellion. Elena forced a smile, her heart racing. She bowed her head and hurried away, clutching both the map and the fear that Calder's net was tightening. That night, she knelt before the altar, staring at the stone floor that hid the crypt beneath. She whispered to herself, "Father, what have you left for me?" For the first time, her fear began to shift into something sharper, resolve. Whatever lay in that crypt, she knew she had to find it. But in the shadows, unseen, someone else was listening.
The crypt beneath St. Augustine's had always been a place of hushed reverence. Parishioners rarely spoke of it, and only the priests had keys to its iron gate. To Elena, it now loomed like both a beacon and a trap, calling her to uncover the truth while promising danger if she dared to step inside. By day, she played her part flawlessly, tending to the children's catechism classes, kneading bread in the convent kitchen, bowing respectfully when Calder passed by. But inside, her thoughts were consumed with the map hidden in her sleeve and the circled mark that whispered, "The truth lies here." Her chance came late one evening when the sisters were gathered in the refectory for supper. Elena slipped away under the pretense of fetching more candles. Moving silently through the dim corridors, she descended the narrow stone staircase that led to the crypt entrance. The gate was as she remembered, rusted, locked, and cold to the touch. She pressed her forehead against the bars, whispering a prayer for courage. The key. Father Gabriel must have hidden it somewhere. Before she could search, footsteps echoed above. She froze, heart hammering, until the sound faded again. When she returned to her cell, she found a small object tucked beneath her pillow. A key, old and iron, wrapped in a strip of linen. There was no note, only the faint scent of incense clinging to the cloth. Her eyes widened. Who had left it? Agnes? Or someone else who knew Gabriel's secret? Either way, the message was clear. Go to the crypt. The following night, Elena prepared. She tucked the key into her rosary pouch, wrapped herself in her cloak, and waited until the convent bells struck midnight. The sisters slept. The halls lay silent. She lit a single candle and made her way down to the crypt gate once more. But she wasn't alone. As she approached the stairwell, she caught sight of a shadow shifting at the corner of the cloister. Someone was following her. She blew out the candle at once, her breath quickening in the darkness. Pressing herself against the cold stone wall, she waited until the footsteps receded. The realization struck her like ice. Calder's eyes were everywhere. He suspected more than he let on, and if he caught her in the crypt, the consequences would be swift and merciless. The next day, Calder confirmed her fear. At morning prayers, he stood before the sisters and spoke in that same polished, venom-laced tone. "The enemy of truth," he said, "is not the heretic outside, but the doubter within. Let us pray that no one among us gives way to temptation or disobedience." His gaze swept across the chapel, pausing just long enough on Elena to make her blood run cold. She lowered her head, but inside, her resolve burned hotter. She would go to the crypt, even if it meant defying Calder himself. For Father Gabriel's sake, for the truth itself, she could no longer turn back.
The convent bells had long fallen silent when Elena stole once more into the night. Every step she took felt like it pressed against the edge of a knife. Cloaked in darkness, she descended the stairwell with the iron key clutched tight in her palm. At the bottom, the crypt gate stood waiting. The lock groaned as she slid the key inside. With a shuddering twist, it opened. The sound echoed like thunder in the silence, and for a moment, she thought the whole convent must surely have heard. She pushed the gate open and stepped into the cold air below. The crypt smelled of dust, stone, and something older, an earthiness that clung to her throat. Her candle flickered, casting jagged shadows over rows of carved tombs and crumbling walls. Saints stared down from faded frescoes, their eyes cracked and mournful. At first, there was nothing unusual, only the remains of centuries past. But as she moved deeper, she noticed something strange. One wall bore fresh scratches, the stone marked by deliberate cuts. She pressed her hand to it. The outline of a cross had been carved there, newer than the rest, as if someone had left a signal. Beneath it, she found loose mortar. Heart racing, she pried at it with trembling fingers, until a small cavity opened. Inside lay a bundle of parchment bound with twine. Alina's hands shook as she drew it out. Dust rose into the air, catching the candlelight like ash. She unwrapped the twine and found Father Gabriel's handwriting, letters written in haste, filled with warnings. If these words are found, then I have failed. Calder is not the shepherd he claims, but the wolf within our walls. The wealth he gathers in God's name is bloodied. He silences those who resist, and worse, he conspires with men outside these walls, men who trade in suffering. If I vanish, know that my silence was forced. Alina pressed her hand over her mouth to keep from gasping. The weight of the words struck like fire in her chest. Calder was guilty, not only of lies, but of crimes that stained the very soul of the church. She read further. Gabriel had hidden names, accounts, shipments, all tied to Calder's secret dealings. And at the very end, a final plea. To whoever finds this, do not let the truth be buried with me. Carry it into the light, even if it costs you everything. Tears stung Alina's eyes. She had wanted certainty, and now she had it. But certainty came with a price. Suddenly, the candle guttered. A draft swept through the crypt, and with it, the sound of a footstep. Alina froze. She turned toward the stairwell. At the top of the steps, a shadow moved. Someone had followed her. Her heart thundered as she stuffed the parchments beneath her cloak. If Calder had discovered her here, there would be no mercy. The gate creaked again. Someone was coming down.
Alina's breath caught in her throat. The flickering flame quivered, throwing frantic shadows across the stone walls. She backed against the nearest pillar, clutching the parchments to her chest as footsteps echoed closer. A figure appeared at the edge of the stairwell, tall and cloaked, carrying no light. For a dreadful moment, Alina feared it was Calder himself, but then, as the intruder drew nearer, she recognized the slighter frame. It was Sister Agnes. "Alina." The whisper was sharp, urgent. "What are you doing here?" Alina exhaled in a rush of relief, but panic returned just as quickly. If Agnes screamed or raised alarm, all would be lost. I came to pray," Alina lied, her voice trembling. She held the candle low, trying to hide the bundle tucked beneath her cloak. Agnes's eyes darted around the crypt. "At this hour? You shouldn't be here." Her tone was wary, but not hostile, more fearful than accusing. She stepped forward, crossing herself as though the air itself pressed heavily upon her. Alina considered confessing the truth, showing her what she had found, but hesitation gnawed at her. Trust in this place could be dangerous. Agnes's gaze lingered on the wall where Alina had uncovered the hiding place. The disturbed mortar glared like a wound. "What is this?" she whispered, stepping closer. "You found something, didn't you?" The silence stretched taut. Alina's heartbeat pounded. "Yes," she admitted finally, her voice a low tremor. "Father Gabriel left warnings, proof of Calder's sins." Agnes's face drained of color. She stumbled back as if struck. "No, you mustn't speak of such things." "Alina," Agnes urged, stepping toward her. "He was murdered. Gabriel knew Calder's corruption, and now I have the evidence. We can't let it stay buried." But Agnes shook her head violently. "You don't understand. Calder has eyes everywhere.
Sisters have disappeared for less. If he learns you hold that proof—" She stopped, swallowing hard, her eyes filling with dread. A sudden sound silenced them both. The groan of the convent's heavy door above. Another presence. Someone else had entered. Agnes's face twisted with fear. She seized Elena's arm, hissing, "Hide it, now." Without another word, Elena stuffed the parchments deeper beneath her cloak. Together, they ducked behind a row of carved tombs, pressing into the cold stone. The echo of boots thundered down the stairwell. This time, it was Calder. His shadow spilled across the crypt, tall and commanding. He carried a lantern that cast harsh light, revealing every corner. His eyes, sharp as blades, scanned the room. Elena gripped Agnes's hand so tightly, her knuckles burned. Neither dared to breathe. Calder walked to the wall, his lantern hovering near the disturbed stone, his mouth curled in suspicion. He touched the cross carved there, tracing it with his finger. Then, slowly, he turned, his gaze sweeping the crypt, hunting for whoever dared disturb the silence of the dead. Elena's heartbeat roared in her ears. She knew one wrong move, one flicker of candlelight, and they would be caught.
Calder's boots scraped against the stone floor, every step echoing like a hammer strike in Elena's chest. She and Agnes crouched lower behind the tomb, pressing themselves into its cold surface. Elena prayed the shadows would swallow them whole. The lantern swung in Calder's hand, spilling light across the crypt in restless arcs. Dust motes glittered like falling embers in its glow. He paused, tilting his head as though listening to something only he could hear. Elena dared not blink. Agnes's lips moved silently, shaping a prayer. Her fingers trembled so badly that Elena reached out, steadying her hand. The parchments pressed against her ribs beneath her cloak, heavy with their secret. Calder stepped closer, his eyes narrowed at the faint smudge of mortar dust near the wall where Elena had pried loose the stone. Slowly, he crouched, running his hand across it. His jaw tightened. "Someone has been here," he muttered, his voice low but edged with fury. Elena felt Agnes tense beside her. Any second he would turn, his lantern would swing, and their hiding place would be revealed. Her mind raced. If Calder discovered them, the parchments would be seized, and Gabriel's last warning silenced forever. The lantern light crept nearer as Calder rose and turned his head, scanning. His steps shifted direction, moving toward their tomb. Agnes squeezed Elena's arm until it hurt. Elena's heart hammered, louder, louder, until she thought surely Calder would hear it. Then, salvation came from above. The convent bell tolled midnight. The sudden clang split the air, reverberating through stone and bone. Calder stiffened, cursing under his breath. He lifted his lantern high, glaring into the shadows one last time. But the bell summoned him, a ritual, an obligation, something that demanded his presence. With a sharp turn, he strode back toward the stairwell. His boots thundered up the steps, the sound fading until only silence remained. Elena collapsed against the tomb, her chest heaving. Agnes pressed her hands to her face, tears streaming in relief. "We cannot stay here," Agnes whispered hoarsely. "If he returns—" "I know," Elena said, steadying herself. She pulled the parchments from her cloak, staring at the fragile pages. Gabriel's cramped handwriting glowed faintly in the candlelight. "These are all we have. If Calder finds them, the truth dies with us." Agnes looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. "Then what will you do?" Elena straightened,
her fear hardening into resolve. "I'll do what Gabriel asked. I'll carry his truth into the light. But not here, not tonight." She tucked the parchment safely back into her cloak. "We'll leave before dawn. Calder cannot stop what has already been written." Agnes hesitated, torn between terror and faith. At last, she nodded, whispering, "Then may God go with us." The two women slipped silently from the crypt, their footsteps muffled, their faces pale in the dying glow of the candle. The weight of Gabriel's last wish pressed heavier than stone, but for the first time, Elena felt its strength too.
The convent bells had long since fallen silent, but Elena's heart still pounded like a drum. She and Agnes moved quietly through the cloister halls, shadows clinging to their habits. Every creak of the floorboards felt like thunder beneath their feet. The parchments were hidden against Elena's chest, wrapped in linen beneath her cloak. She touched them every few steps, needing to reassure herself that they were still there, that Gabriel's final words had not been stolen by the night. Agnes whispered, "Are you certain about this? Dawn will expose us. The gates will be watched." Elena's gaze hardened. "Then we will not leave through the gates." She led Agnes down a side corridor, toward an old storage passage she remembered from her novitiate years. Few used it now. Most believed it sealed by rubble after a storm. Elena had once helped carry supplies through it. She prayed her memory was correct, that it still led to the outer wall. But as they neared, the faint glow of torchlight flickered against the stone. Elena froze. Voices. "Don't you tell you, Calder suspects something," a guard muttered, his tone tense. "He says the sisters hide secrets." Another scoffed, but uneasily. "Secrets? In a convent?" "Yes, he swore he saw movement in the crypt. He believes the priest's death was no accident, that someone carries his burden now." Elena felt Agnes tremble beside her. Calder's suspicion had grown sharper than she feared. Already his net was tightening. They could not linger. Elena pulled Agnes back into the shadows, retreating toward the chapel instead. There they sank to their knees before the altar, not to pray, but to think. The moonlight spilled through the stained glass, painting Elena's face in fractured blues and reds. Her reflection in the polished wood of the pew seemed like a stranger, a woman marked not by vows of silence, but by fire and defiance. Agnes whispered, "If we are caught, they will say we are heretics. They will strip us of everything. Are you prepared for that?" Elena turned her eyes upward toward the crucifix hanging high above. "I was prepared the moment Gabriel placed these words in my hands." For a moment, silence reigned. Then a heady door slammed somewhere in the convent. Boots thundered across the stone. Calder's voice carried like a whip. "Search every corner. No one leaves until I have answers." The sisters in the dormitory stirred, confusion and fear spreading in whispers. Agnes clutched Elena's arm. "He's coming for us." Elena rose, her resolve burning hotter with every step. "Then we will not hide like thieves any longer." She turned to Agnes, her eyes fierce. "If Calder wants answers, let us give them to him, but on our terms." Agnes gasped. "You mean to face him?" "Not yet," Elena said, "but we must be ready when he comes. Gabriel's truth was meant for the world, not just for our fear." Outside, Calder's orders grew louder, the sound of torches crackling, boots scouring stone, doors being flung open. The hunt had begun, and for the first time, Elena no longer felt hunted. She felt chosen.
The convent felt less like a sanctuary now and more like a fortress under siege. Calder's men scoured the halls with torches, their shadows twisting like monsters across the stone walls. Doors slammed open. Startled sisters cried out, their prayers replaced by gasps of fear. Elena stood in the chapel's dim light, her back straight, the parchments pressed to her chest. Agnes tugged her sleeve, whispering urgently, "We must run. If he finds us—" "No," Elena said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. "Running will only confirm his suspicions. We will stand here. Let him find us, but not as fugitives, as witnesses." The great doors of the chapel burst open. Calder entered, flanked by guards. His lantern cast a cruel glow on his face, sharpening every angle into menace. His eyes locked on Elena instantly, as though he had been hunting her alone all this time. "You," he spat, his voice low but thunderous in the still air. "Step forward." Agnes whimpered, but Elena placed a calming hand on her shoulder. Then she walked forward, her footsteps echoing. Calder's gaze swept over her habit, her clasped hands, her pale but unwavering eyes. "I smelled the dust of the crypt on you. I saw the marks where stones had been moved." His voice grew harsher. "What did you take?" Elena kept her chin high. "What Father Gabriel entrusted to me is not yours to claim." A murmur spread among the sisters gathered at the edges of the chapel. Calder's jaw tightened. He gestured sharply, and 2 guards stepped forward. "Search her!" Elena stepped back, her voice rising. "Touch me, and you defile not only me, but the sanctuary of this convent." The sisters gasped. A few stepped forward, their fear giving way to courage. Calder's eyes darted around, realizing his authority could crack if he pushed too far too quickly. "You think these walls protect you?" He sneered. "The church bends to men like me, not to grieving women and whispering nuns. Hand over what you've stolen, and I may spare this house." Elena's hands trembled, but she lifted them, not in surrender, but in defiance. Slowly, she drew the parchments from her cloak. Gasps filled the chapel as the fragile pages caught the lantern light. "These words are not mine," Elena said, her voice steady. "They belong to truth, to justice, to every soul who deserves to know what Gabriel uncovered." Calder's eyes blazed. He stepped closer, his voice a hiss. "You don't understand the danger of what you hold." "I understand enough," Elena replied. Her voice echoed against the high arches, carrying to every ear. "I understand that Gabriel died to keep this hidden from you." The sisters around them stirred, their fear hardening to outrage. Agnes, trembling but emboldened, stepped forward to stand at Elena's side. For the first time, Calder faltered. The weight of the sisters' eyes pressed against him. The parchment, visible, undeniable, burned like fire in the dim chapel. And though he stood only steps away, it was clear to everyone watching. Power was slipping from his grasp.
The chapel was silent, yet heavy with the storm of hearts pounding in unison. Calder loomed before Elena, his face twisted with rage, his voice rising to fill the vaulted ceiling. "Lies," he thundered. "Gabriel was a fool, and you are his puppet. Those parchments will burn before they ever leave these walls." But the sisters did not flinch. One by one, they moved closer, forming a barrier of veils and habits around Elena. Their fear had transformed into resolve. Agnes, her voice shaking but strong, spoke first. "You may command soldiers, but you cannot command truth." The words rippled through the room, stirring the others. Murmurs of assent filled the chapel until Calder realized he was no longer the voice of authority. He was the intruder in a house that no longer bowed to him. Elena lifted the parchments high, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These are Father Gabriel's words. He uncovered the thefts, the corruption, the betrayal hidden beneath vows and robes. He died protecting this truth. And now, so long as even one of us lives, this truth will not die." The guards hesitated. Calder barked at them. "Seize her! Seize them all!" But the guards exchanged uneasy glances. Their hands did not move. The sight of dozens of nuns standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces illuminated by the flickering candles, made the men pause. Calder's orders no longer carried weight in the presence of such unity. Fury consumed him. He lunged toward Elena, his hand outstretched to rip the parchments away. But before he could reach her, Agnes stepped in front, her arms wide. Others followed, a living wall between predator and prey. Calder stopped, breath heaving, his face flushed crimson. His hand trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that his power was crumbling. "You think you've won?" he spat. "Words will not save you. The world bows to force, not parchment." Elena's voice rang like a bell. "Force fades. Truth endures." The sisters echoed her words, a chorus rising in defiance. "Truth endures. Truth endures." Calder stumbled back, his authority shattered by the sound. Even his guards lowered their torches, unwilling to fight a battle they knew was already lost. For the first time, Calder appeared small, swallowed by the shadows of the very chapel he once sought to dominate. He retreated a step, then another, until at last he turned and stormed from the hall, his footsteps fading into silence. Elena lowered the parchments, her hands still trembling. She looked at the sisters, at Agnes, at all those who had found courage tonight, and her heart swelled with both grief and triumph. Gabriel's last wish was not only that the truth be revealed, but that we remember our strength is not in silence, but in unity. The sisters bowed their heads, not in submission, but in reverence to what they had protected. And as dawn's first light filtered through the stained glass, painting the floor with colors of renewal, Elena whispered the words that would outlive even her. "Justice is not given. It is carried by those who refuse to let it die."
If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories to life. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in her place?